Hello, everyone, and welcome to the HGC post show number 3 for 2018. We had a pretty exciting week, actually. I'm gonna start it on the low end. I'm actually gonna start with China because, for once, there's actually a Chinese series that I'd recommend watching. Super Perfect Team versus CE. Again, China is currently best of 2 and is happening a little faster. Only half of the matches are actually broadcast, although replays are available for all of them via Master League. They haven't actually been posted on Master League yet, but I have them. So if there's any game you guys really want, but there isn't a VOD for, feel free to post about it in the Discord. And if it seems like the drafts are interesting or whatever, maybe I'll go over the game's actual replay. There's a cast for it, I won't do that, but for the uncasted games, I will. But I actually thought the casters did a really nice job on Super Perfect Team versus C, and I thought the games themselves were relatively interesting. And we are seeing some influences from both the North American and the European, and even the Korean meta a little bit in these drafts compared to what we see from China. No Zarya's, for instance, which is popular in the Chinese meta for some strange reason I don't entirely understand. I don't feel like Zarya is in a very good place right now with the tower changes, personally, but she can't run it down, as the saying goes. Moving over to Korea. Tempest versus Ballistics was a 3-1. This cements Tempest as the current top team in Korea by a good margin, which isn't that surprising. Tempest has always been sort of a team fight team, and a lot of the maps that are popular right now have really strong objectives. So if you win team fights, you can win games because you won the objective. And it just sort of seems like a lot of the drafts that we see are extremely team fight oriented, and maybe that's the meta right now. There's still a risk of getting out macroed if you go too heavy on the team fight and don't draft enough wave clear. We've seen that happen in a couple of games in EU in particular, but Tempest cementing their spot, top team in Korea. Fun series. Moving over to EU. I'm always conflicted about EU. I think I'm conflicted about EU. 8 months already, damn. Thank you for making me a better Arthas. Ghost Dunk, thank you for the resub. Welcome back to the guest list. I have many questions about that set. Yes, actually that set, I think, has the second most questions asked in post already. Fnatic versus Diamond Skin. Not so much because the games were clean, but because it was a 3-1 and I expected it to be a 3-0. But also just Kael'thas. How effective can a hero be when it's picked last in the draft in 3 games in a row? I think that's the question here. And particularly on Battlefield of Eternity, it's not a normal pick for that map. Kael'thas has been seen on Infernal Shrines. He's been seen on Tomb of the Spider Queen. Typically because he has wave clear and it's good on those maps. But do you need wave clear in Battlefield of Eternity? Is he good at racing the objective? The answer to both those questions is really kind of no. So it was fun. It was fun. Moving over to an A. I have to recommend Heroes Hearth versus Team 12 for 2 reasons. One, it was an upset. Team 12 was expected to win this match, and Heroes Hearth is kind of a wild card team. People don't know exactly how good they really are. And so the fact that they've lost to some teams and then won against a better team is kind of like, oh, well, you know, maybe they're improving or maybe Team 12 is inconsistent. I will say that Team 12 had to show a lot of their drafts and what they were drafting against, well, Gale Force, the 2 days prior, and that gave Heroes Hearth a lot of information about maps and drafts and all sorts of other things. And so Team 12 but Team 12 went with some very unconventional drafts, and I think part of that was that they were afraid to do what they had been doing against us because they didn't want to fall into some draft trap. Heroes Hearth was also allowed to have Hanzo 3 games in a row. Hanzo is just busted. Hanzo is an extremely strong hero, so I was a little bit surprised that that happened, but Team 12 keep letting him have it, and the series ended up going 3-1. That's the recommended set from each region. Going over the standings real quick, I think Gale Force is the only team that's actually played... No, Space Station's played 5 games, Gale Force has played 5 games, and Tempo Storm has played 5 games. So we are... Those teams only have 1 match each left for the following weeks. Every other team has 2 matches, at least 1 week. And it seems... I believe Team Freedom is locked to go to Clash at this point. I don't think they can not go to Clash. Tempo Storm doesn't have any scenarios where they don't go to Clash, I don't believe. And I don't believe Team 12 can end up 3-4 if they lose their 2 remaining matches. So there are scenarios, I believe, where Team 12 does not go to Clash. And then if we beat Heroes Hearth and Team 12 wins their remaining matches and we beat Tempo Storm, or if Heroes Hearth loses against us and then also loses against either LFM or Simplicity and we win against them, we'll be going. So there are scenarios where I think Gale Force is actually favored to go overall in terms of the number of scenarios. But Team Freedom is definitely the #1 team in NA right now. I think that's very clear. Tempo Storm, I think, is a solid #2, at least currently, based on performance. And then Team 12 seems oddly inconsistent, which is, I mean, they brought their A game against us, and then they lost to HGC. It seems strange. Yeah, regardless of all else, we have to win this weekend. EU is a little bit more... Dignitas, Fnatic, both in a really good spot. I believe Dignitas and Fnatic are in positions where it's very unlikely that they do not go. They have like a 96% chance of going to Clash. And then it seems like Method and Liquid will be the next 2 teams, but you never quite know with EU, because Tricked has often popped up at the last second to do amazing things. With the above, GFE goes to Clash, otherwise HGC. I believe there are scenarios where Simplicity, if they win all their remaining matches and certain losses happen for certain teams, Simplicity could go. Because Simplicity is at 1-3. So the best, for instance, Gale Force can do, we have 2 remaining matches. The best we can do is 4-3. Well, Simplicity can do 4-3, right? But Simplicity wouldn't go over Gale Force if we were both 4-3 because we won the head-to-head against them. But for instance, LFM Esports is in the same position. They're 1-3. If they win all 3 of their remaining matches and end up going 4-3, and then we beat Heroes Hearth, LFM would go over us because they would be tied in match score, but then they would win the head-to-head because they beat us. So I think there's scenarios where every team can go except Space Station Gaming. Space Station Gaming cannot go to Clash. But it's not just a question of, are those scenarios technically possible? It's how likely are they? Because I believe the LFM Esports involves other upsets that have to happen as well, so that tiebreakers can go a certain way. So it's not simply a question of... Realistically, I believe it's either HHE or GFE. Yes, realistically. The question in Korea is who's going to take the fourth spot. Currently, it looks like Gluck is doing really well in that regard. 4 teams go to Clash. So for those of you who are not familiar with the new Clash rules, minor regions no longer go to Clashes. Blizzard decided that watching pro teams from major regions farm minor region teams with an occasional like 1-game upset was kind of boring and demoralizing. So minor regions now have their own Clash. Latin America and ANZ have their own little tournaments and they play against each other. And I believe one of them, the winner of that goes to Mid-Season Brawl. But Western and Eastern Clash are now the top 4 teams from each region. And then the winning region gets to bring a sister team from their region for the Mid-Season Brawl. So I believe Brawl is 3 teams from each region. But, for instance, if Korea wins Eastern Clash, 4 Korean teams will go instead of 3, and then 3 Chinese teams, and that'll be 7. And then if, let's say, Europe wins Western Clash, 4 Europe teams and 3 NA teams will go, and that'll be 7 teams versus 7 teams. So 3, 4, 4, 3. 14 teams total. Believe that's the rules. I think there's some other things I'm missing in there, but the format for the clashes and the brawls is substantially revised this year. All of that information is published on HGC's website if you want to go look at it in more detail. It is publicly available already. I believe there was an article about it at the beginning of HGC. You know, what's in store for the year ahead, sort of thing. But that's the basic gist. Basic gist. All right, moving on to post-show questions. Gilly mentioned that Jaina has fallen off. Can you talk about that? You mentioned she was in the meta because she could blow people up with double support, but do you think she's fallen off like Gilly said? If so, do you think this is the correct decision from teams, or would they start valuing it? And what do you think was the mentality of her seeing less play? I actually don't exactly know why Jaina saw less play this week in particular. It could have just been the maps that were being picked to some degree. It could have been the teams. There are a lot of high priority picks in the damage slots for a lot of teams. She only saw 1 game in NA all weekend. But she did see some play in Korea. 2 games, 4 games, it looks like. Yeah. I'm really not sure exactly why Jaina fell off in Korea and NA, to be honest. It really does seem like a draft consideration. The prioritization of Greymane, and then a lot of people were running Medivh. There were a lot of... You can't run like... So Medivh essentially takes your flex spot in a draft, right? And so do you run Medivh, Jaina, and then your standard comp? Because if you run Jaina plus a range plus Medivh, you've deviated really far from standard safe play. And that's a significant issue in a lot of ways. I think that Jaina is very strong. And I think playing Jaina well involves a lot of patience. Maybe the teams don't like that style of play. But she is somewhat vulnerable to dive, since it does take a long time to build up her ice block, so you kind of need the right tank configuration with her. So I think in a lot of cases teams are drafting particular heroes, and then they're like, well, we don't have room for Jaina. It's not that we don't like Jaina, it's that we don't have room for her in this draft, because the draft doesn't fit these requirements. And I think that when different heroes get prioritized, that stops to happen, because building comps well is a lot about drafting synergy or not drafting vulnerabilities. That's sort of the mindset that a lot of pro drafters have. And in that context, Jaina can easily get replaced by something else that fits better. I didn't expect her to drop off that much, though. That is kind of interesting. Maybe people just forgot that she existed for like a few games. They're like, Jaina? Jaina's also surprisingly good at doing mercs. So if you don't have a Greymane or a Sonya or a Hanzo and you still need a mercer with wave clear, in a lot of cases Jaina's the best remaining choice. I actually think Jaina could have improved some of the drafts I'm looking at right now too. Interesting. Neither of these teams, GFE and SSG, seem to be on the Hanzo train. What's up with that? Do these teams not have a strong Hanzo player? Have pros figured out how to counterplay him now? I was actually a little bit surprised that SSG just never seemed to take Hanzo in their series against us, like in one game, I think. And then they took it 2 games against in their series against Snowstorm. Jay Shrite has actually practiced Hanzo a lot. He is probably one of the best pro Hanzo players in North America. But they just didn't take it. As for us, we just really never really got the option to take Hanzo. Same reason that, Jaina just doesn't. It didn't work for the drafts we had planned out. We expected the enemy team to either take or ban Hanzo in our first picks, and we constructed our drafts accordingly. And even when they didn't, we were happy with the comps we'd built, and Hanzo just wasn't like, you can't just slot Hanzo into a comp and have it work if you didn't plan the comp around having a Hanzo. Hanzo comps that we've seen have great success are like Hanzo Tassadar or Hanzo with a monk or an Uther to like babysit him so he doesn't die in the against dive heroes, things like that. And you don't want to just start slotting in different heroes because they happen to be up. You don't want to draft strong heroes. You want to draft strong comps. Another question. The whole draft of GFE versus Space Station Gaming Game 3, where did Hanzo go? This is the draft. Hanzo was neither picked nor banned. And it's that same answer. Like, also, it's worth noting here that heroes are not just drafted because of a certain power level. They're drafted for certain talent builds. So if you play W build Hanzo, which NA does, you wouldn't think to draft him on a wave clear centric map because his wave clear sucks without Q build. So Space Station potentially could have drafted Hanzo for wave clear here. Instead, they drafted the Jaina. And EU, I think, would play Hanzo just fine on Tomb of the Spider Queen with Q build with W's around the turn-ins just to interrupt because of the random bounces. But when you play a hero a certain way and you think they can do certain things, you don't consider them on maps where they can't do those things very well. So Hanzo in NA tends to get played on boss maps, which of course Tomb has a boss. And that's pretty much it. Like, he doesn't really get played on wave clear centric maps for the most part so far in HGC. Which is strange to me because his wave clear is actually quite good. But literally from first pick to our last pick, our draft here was planned, beginning to end. But there were some forks in it if Space Station Gaming had picked certain heroes, but they didn't, and we were okay with what happened. We weren't going to pick Hanzo. They didn't pick Hanzo. It seemed fine. Same game Parking is talking about. Diablo pick into ETC. We have Medivh. So does Medivh mitigate Diablo's weaknesses here? Yes. Yes, he does. Also, point and click effects are always good against Tracer. And portals allow us mistakes and mobility. So it puts us in a relatively good position. Above game a bit under 4 minutes and Greymane kills Zag solo bot lane. We didn't see it on screen what happened there. I actually asked Michael about that, and he said that Zag overextended and he waited in a bush and just killed her. 30 seconds later, same thing happened to Jaina. Again, Michael just cleared the wave, waited in the bush top. Jaina walked up and died. That's literally what happened. There's no real mystery here. If Greymane gets the drop on you and you're overextended in lane, he can chase, he does a lot of damage, you die. You have to be careful against a Greymane, and if you're not careful, you lose. You literally just push all your buttons and then go into Worgen and start razor swiping and autoing, and they die. As for why they overextended, I believe Zag was trying really hard to win the lane, and Zag can sort of win the poke war against most heroes. And Jaina's job was to be double soaking, just clear wave rotate, clear wave rotate, clear wave rotate. So if you're keeping track of Jaina's Blizzard timer, you know when she wants to step up and clear the wave, and you're just sitting there in the bush and you wait for them to step up, they're in a lot of trouble. Why are pros not checking the map to see if Greymane is missing before stepping up in a lane? Usually it's just a bad comms issue, or overestimating how much damage you can take and how quickly you can get away. I think Zag players in particular overestimate how quickly they can get away from a melee hero in a lot of cases, but Greymane has so much mobility with Razor Swipe. Yeah, SSG should not have been playing that far up in lane. They shouldn't have been. And they died for it. It's pretty straightforward. You were given a shout out after the GFE versus Space Station. How does it feel to be famous now? I'm not famous. Here's actually a barometer to tell if you're famous or not. Like really famous, right? So most people on the internet can be like e-famous, where anywhere between 150 to maybe 200, 300, 400 people will recognize your face. So you walk through a public environment where they happen to be, they're gonna be like, oh, you're that guy. Someone, you know, they recognize your face. That's it. But a good barometer for being famous is actually a negative thing. There's a certain number of crazy people per 100, you know, per like 10,000 people, right? Maybe 1 in 10,000 people is genuinely insane. You're not really famous until you've reached a wide enough audience that even people who don't like you watch you and comment, right? Because at that point, you aren't just being watched by people who agree with what you're saying or interested in what you're saying. You're being watched by people who heavily dislike you and disagree with you, but feel the need to watch you because you're part of a culture. That's fame. Fame is when you become a part of a culture as opposed to being liked by a group of people. And generally, generally what happens in that case is a negative thing. You start receiving death threats, negative comments. I actually have received death threats as a streamer, for the record, but they were from when I was playing Hearthstone, and I was actually had a larger viewership. But I don't think by that definition I'm really all that famous. Have Korea's newcomers proven themselves enough to scrim the holdovers if they aren't doing it already yet? That's actually a good question, and the answer is I don't know. Korea has a very incestuous scrim relationship. Tempest actually used VPNs to scrim Chinese teams, top Chinese teams, in 2016. So they told everyone they weren't scrimming, and they were just thought that, and, you know, and everyone was like underestimating them because they weren't scrimming. In reality, they were scrimming a shitload against top Chinese teams. But Miracle, or old KSV, for instance, had a crazy relationship where they only scrimmed their sister team, Miracle. So I actually don't know what the scrim scene is like in Korea. I could ask G-Clef. He might know. And I could probably get a better answer. But yeah, I don't know. Why is Malfurion so heavily prioritized? Malfurion's sustain healing is insanely strong. Also, he can heal... The way regrowth works now, it's 20 seconds on a target, and as long as you're in range to Moonfire's any enemy hero, you can constantly heal that target. So if Tracer goes really fucking deep, like into Africa, all the way around to flank the backline, and it was less than 20 seconds to get there, you can continue to heal the Tracer even though you're here and she's there. So in a weird way, Malfurion is arguably the best dive healer in the game because he doesn't have to dive with you to keep healing you. And Malfurion is being prioritized because the heroes that are really good right now, like Hanzo, are very vulnerable to dive, like Tracer, like Greymane. So it's kind of an interesting relationship. Also, he's one of the, like, he's, I think, maybe the only support at this point that has area CC. Like, his root is a big area. There's really no other support currently that has area CC, and he has innervate. So he has a lot of little advantages that that add up quite a bit. Method versus Zealots game 2. Blaze drafted as a tank. What's the thought process here, and how viable is this? So this is something that I've been debating a lot. And this was a win for Method. Uther Divine Storm. In the base kit, though. Oh, Stukov. Stukov as well. Stukov has kind of a similar dynamic, but you're on a much tighter timetable than 20 seconds, right? Because you can spread your Q to someone and they can go in, and then you can D them if they get low, but the timetable is much tighter. And Stukov has other vulnerabilities in the sense that he has to continually channel his area CC where his mouth can cast it and walk away. But Stukov is also really strong right now. So here's my thing. From talking to EU players and having discussions and even trying Blaze as a tank in scrims a few times, imagine if that was a Johanna. Would the draft really be that different in most people's minds? Like, Chromie has okay wave clear. Tastar has okay wave clear. Tracer and Malfurion after his rework have no wave clear. Maybe you can argue Tracer's wave clear at 13. So on a wave clear centric map, or on a rotational centric map, all rotation maps are wave clear centric because wave clear enables rotations. You need more wave clear than your comp currently has, and you need a tank. Well, the typical wave clear tank is Johanna, but Johanna offers no personal damage and no self-sustain. Really. Whereas Blaze has self-sustain, superior wave clear. His wave clear is better than Johanna's, and an interesting heroic. And he doesn't have to, he's not constrained to engaging every 30 seconds, right? Or every 60 seconds. He doesn't need his heroic to engage the way Johanna does. He even has an unstoppable. If he wants to take the level 1 talent that gives you unstoppable after you pick up several globes. So I'm almost feeling like Blaze is just a better Johanna, basically. Yes, Vasamasti, exactly. Blaze just feels like a better Johanna in many ways. If you need a wave clear tank, probably pick Blaze over Joe. I think that's the easiest way to categorize what Blaze is currently good for as a main tank. I believe, personally, that Blaze is better as an offlaner. But if you have a draft where you would pick Johanna, unless you really need the blind for some reason, which can happen because of Cassia comps, I would just pick Blaze instead. In a good number of cases. Why Insight on Kerosene? GFE versus Team 12 Game 1. Isn't it just harder to hit with Blaze's Engage, though? It is harder to hit, but it's also on a much shorter cooldown. Also, his escape is better than Joe's. As long as he doesn't get body blocked, he's pretty safe from dying. Whereas Joe can pop her D, and if that's not enough to get her out of trouble, she's just dead. Which is kind of unfortunate. Gale Force versus Team 12. Why Insight on... Actually, not exactly sure why Akka decided to go Insight here. I'm not going to lie. We have been playing Insight. We played it against Space Station Gaming. It's had really good success in scrims. But into Arthas, I'm not sure that was the pick. This game ended up being really strange for a variety of reasons. Has there really been 0 Braxis games in any region? Why isn't it being played? I believe there were Braxis games. What's the pick into Arthas? I'm just not sure that Kharazim was the pick into Arthas. Like, everything about Kharazim sucks to have attack speed slowed. And you can't really not do that in an Arthas. Obviously, they last picked the Arthas. I don't know. I know the team wasn't happy with that draft for a large variety of reasons. The mobility should never be in range of Arthas. Team 12 is deathballing with a Medivh, though. Like, you can't be on anyone and not be on the Medivh. Greymane, Rag, Stukov, like, that's 4 melee heroes that just need to stand on an Arthas, and Medivh is in bird form or denying you somehow. Like, Team 12 drafted a pure Deathball comp. You can't really go Insight into Deathball, and I don't think you can really go Monk into a Deathball that involves an Arthas. If they have ranged heroes that are actually staying at ranged and poking, it's like a very different scenario, but they didn't have anything like that. They just Deathballed. As Glau would put it, which I think is actually something he stole from Prismat, they played the Amoeba. So this is kind of a funny question. And it's, have there really been 0 games of Braxis played in HGC? It's not quite 0. There's 1 played in China. But it's just, the map is usually banned by one team or another team, and most teams won't voluntarily go there as second pick. So you have a really unusual situation here. Braxis is available, which doesn't happen. Usually, like in Korea, I don't believe there's been a match where Braxis has not been banned by one team at least. And in order for a team to pick it, they have to be second pick. Braxis is a map where you can lose the game in the draft, probably more so than any other map. Braxis, there's no recovering in Braxis. So if you fuck up the draft, you just lost the game. And first pick has a much easier time not fucking up the draft than second pick does. So why would you voluntarily go to a map where you're going to be disadvantaged inherently because you're second pick? Why do people pick Ling against Anub? Because there's 4 other heroes you can kill that are not the Anub, and because Disintegrate is the single best counter to Cocoon in the entire game because it has the highest tick rate in terms of damage. And Anubarak without Cocoon is kind of shit. If Anubarak's Cocoon is not really enabling your team to do something like force a 5v4 very aggressively, then Anub is fragile and sucks. So it's pretty simple, really. You once said that if you're the better team, you take your opponent to Dragonshire. GFE taking Team 12 to Dragonshire, is this a statement or a call-up by GFE? I think Dragonshire may be one of our best maps as a team right now. So we took them to Dragonshire because we were confident in our Dragonshire. And I'm not sure what other map we would have taken them to instead either, is the thing. That isn't necessarily a call-out, though. I do think the better team tends to win on Twin. I do believe it's still true that the better team tends to win on Dragonshire. 16 minutes into the Dragonshire game, GFE takes the bot fourth and goes for a siege camp. Was this the right call, or was this too conservative of a play? I think that it's possible that that was too conservative of a play. There were, I think the death timers were 1, 3, and like 17 or something at the time, because there were 3 dead on the enemy team. It was very close to that. And if they just kept pushing, they potentially could have gotten the wall and then safely backed up because they have a Medivh, right? Am I crazy? No, we had a Medivh. So we could have potentially gotten the wall and backed up. And that would have put us in a situation. You're welcome, DevinGG. That would have potentially put us in a situation where we would have tied the race to 20, and things would have been very, very different. But getting the siege camp was a conservative call. I'm not sure it was the wrong call, even though we did end up losing the game. Did I miss Cav opinion on HGC? I recommended it as a series to watch. So technically you missed my opinion. I don't know. Getting the siege camp was like the safest possible call, but the safest possible call is not always the right possible call, if that makes sense. I think the odds of winning would have been higher with a riskier play there. But in a situation where you were like ahead, that would have been the safest possible call because you just want to get further ahead. Was Team 12 as terrifying as it wasn't all your nightmares? I'm actually not really afraid of other teams because my attitude with my team is that as long as I think they're playing their best and they are consistently improving in their drafting and in their attitude about the game, I'm happy. If they don't do their best, then I'm unhappy. I actually don't necessarily think they did their best in the Team 12 series. The Battlefield of Eternity game was very winnable. The Dragonshire game was very winnable, and they didn't. They feel the same way about it. But I don't care about other teams the way I care about my team. I only want my team to do well as they feel like they can, and as well as I see them do in scrims. If they're not doing that, then it's not like the other team's fault. So the other team doesn't really factor in for me. Is the 4 melee comp viable without the Lucio? Yes, melee comps in general are quite strong, but Lucio helps them gap close more than once, and Lucio helps them not get disengaged from. So there's lots of important considerations there. Lucio is very, very helpful. For those of you who don't know the question, Tempo Storm ran an all melee comp. Actually, they did it in Dragonshire too. Look at this. Tyrael, Mathael, Rag, Kerrigan's right there. No Lucio. And they did it on Towers of Doom as well with Lucio. But this is just... It just has lots of wave clear and sustain. This is masterleague.net. It is a resource for anyone interested in the competitive hot scene. It collects every pro game and has the drafts and everything on them. It's very useful. After watching Team 12 and TS straight up outclass their opponents for the most part, do you think there's a sizable gap between the top and middle of an A? I actually don't think there's a sizable gap between the top and middle of an A. I think that most of the gap in an A right now, at least between certain teams, is a mindset issue. The players on the top teams are really confident and don't get nervous when they're actually playing their sets. Except, I don't think I've ever seen my team yet play as well in an actual match as they have in scrims. The set versus Space Station Gaming was the closest, but Space Station Gaming made a lot of mistakes, at least in my opinion. So the sets looked very one-sided. But in terms of scrim results, we're fairly even with Tempo and Team 12 in terms of our scrim results against them. And yet we couldn't beat Team 12, when it counted. So I think the gap is mostly mindset. And it's just really hard to do that. People get nervous on game day. It's stage fright. It's very difficult to mentally get someone to a point where they're okay performing at their normal level, even though they have all this extra pressure. And I think I've done a relatively good job of that, but it's just not enough. Not enough and not yet. When will the backdoor meta end? never. As long as heroes like Greymane and Illidan that can just rush core down exist, the backdoor meta will always be something you have to be aware of. It is comp dependent. If you have like a Mathael and like an Ariel and like a Hanzo, these heroes suck at core damage. They suck at backdooring cores. If you have those heroes, you just can't backdoor. So when you're watching a pro game and you're thinking, are they going to backdoor? Look at their comp. If their comp is, yeah, we can threaten your core because you have no keep and it's post 20 and we can just wreck it in 10 seconds, well, then you have to guard against the backdoor because you have to guard against losing. You don't have a choice. And when teams start respecting that more, the backdoor meta will be less prevalent because they will not just randomly let it happen. Also, heroes like Lucio, Abathur, with the right clone, because you can just rush to the core even faster. There's certain heroes that just enable core calls and others that don't. And if your comp can enable a core call, it's something you should always be thinking of in the back of your mind as a shot caller. As a follow-up, does core need to be buffed? I actually don't know what overall effect it would have on the game if core got buffed. Like, if you buff core to the point where you need an objective or you need a full 5-man team wipe to actually end on core, if you don't have a core racing hero, I don't think that increases the prevalence of core racing heroes in drafts. I think that just increases the prevalence of game length. Like, people aren't going to risk core calls if core is significantly stronger if they don't have a core racing hero. They're just going to wait and strangle out the game. Maybe even like the average number of keeps per game would go up, or keeps killed would go up if you buff the core. It'd be pretty interesting. Tempo Storm versus Simplicity Game 2. Can you explain the idea behind the draft and why it worked so well? Oof. Alright. Sorry, guys. I was getting messaged. Okay, Tempo Storm. No, not Tempo Storm. Tempest. No, Tempo Storm versus Simplicity. Yeah. Game 2. So back to the melee comp. People always asking about the melee comp. So the first thing we're going to do here is back up and ask, what does a tank do for a composition? Tempo Storm has a tankless comp here. Don't be fooled by the Dahaka. There's no tank in this composition. What does a tank do? A tank provides vision. What's one of the best ways of providing vision? Having really good wave clear. Ragnaros, Mathael, and Kerrigan actually all have reasonable wave clear, as does Dahaka. So if you can... And Lucio actually has, I believe it was even taking this game, Boombox, level 7. At level 7, which also gives you vision. So a lot of the vision can be maintained just by having superior wave clear, which they do. Tempo Storm has better wave clear than Simplicity with this comp, which means they are always the first ones leaving the lane, which means they can watch you rotate out because their minions are pushing in. And you have to come clear the minions, and then they see you doing it. They know where you are. It's like magic. So that's number one. Wave clear inherently in some waves gives you vision mechanics. Number 2, peel. If you have 4 people all diving the same target, do any of them really need peel? Like, does the Kerrigan really need peel if there's 3 other melees around her that are like blocking the skill shots? Like, it's hard to focus one target when they're all clumped up. Generally speaking, when you want to have a bunch of clumped people, you actually want a lot of area damage. If your comp is sort of single target focused and trying to pick people off in the chaos of team fights, and suddenly they're all clumped up and you can't really hit everything on the same target, it's very difficult to kill people. You don't really need peel at that point. Damage soak. All 3 of those heroes have self-sustain and reasonable health pools. So if you had, let's say you dropped, 1 for a tank and then dropped 1 for a ranged assassin, and you would have a standard comp. Your average health across the comp would actually be basically the same. What ranged assassins give you, back up. So that's sort of the tanking side of it, right? That's the tanking side of it. All of the same things that a tank does are covered by everyone just going in and having a lot of wave clear. Most tanks don't have good wave clear. Like, bear that in mind. Most tanks don't have good wave clear. And then the big thing that ranged assassins give you is poke. The ability to do damage from range. This is particularly valuable when you're behind and you need to wear people down and then go in for the kill, because you have that level disadvantage and the scaling disadvantage, and sometimes even a talent disadvantage. But if you just commit to every fight and never poke, you're just like, oh, there's someone there, we're going in. Every time, you just, bam, we're in. You don't need ranged heroes. At that point, ranged heroes are arguably a liability, because if they're ever out of position, they're just dead into a comp like this one. So all melee comps are really strong. They've always been strong. We've seen comps like this with, 3 warriors back in the day. 3 warriors and one auto attack assassin when warriors were very overtuned and were doing a lot more damage than they currently do. And we've seen tankless comps very similar to this before with Thrall, when Thrall was extremely overpowered and was essentially being played as a tank. And the big thing you really need is disengage, and Simplicity has that in terms of Gust, and even in terms of Sanctification, and they could have gone Bunker, but they just didn't play around Tempo's commitment. Simplicity was very spread out usually. They weren't coordinated in the way they were going to deal with it, and Tempo Storm just came in from all sides and killed someone. Apparently the VOD for this game isn't posted, which is really strange. Also, ranged heroes have less raw strats. That is true. Ranged heroes get... Part of the Blizzard's balance philosophy is that ranged heroes should do less damage and have less health in exchange for being ranged. And melee heroes, because the risk-reward is higher, should have more health and more damage, and therefore they end up with more stats. Tempest versus Ballistics Game 2 looked like really one-sided draft due to Ballistics murking also requiring their hyper carry. What could Ballistics have done here? Game 3, why Chen? So Ballistics versus Tempest, Game 2. Greymane is the hyper carry here. I'm not actually sure that Greymane counts as a hyper carry in the current meta, but he is drafted as one here, as you can tell from the double support, double tank, sort of trying to maintain that style of play. I think what Ballistics could have done here was draft another damage and not draft Ariel. Ariel is so terrible. Greymane is simply not good enough as an energy generator. Maybe after the changes to Ariel, he is. And I realized that they kind of wanted to cancel for Mosh Pit, potentially. And they wanted some sort of knockback or blind for the Cassia to limit the value of Fend with her E, and then get her blinded herself at 13. Because Cassia is an auto attacker. She does do a significant amount of auto attack damage. There are other things they could have drafted to Mosh cancel that wouldn't have meant Greymane was all of their... like a significant portion of their wave clear and all of their murking. It was so painful to watch. What about KT here? Actually, I think any mage would have been available. I'm a little bit surprised they didn't just go Li Ming. Li Ming's up. Li Ming has not great wave clear, but she has an interrupt for Mosh Pit with Wave of Force. Cassia sucks into every single mage. There's literally not a single good mage against Cassia, or single mage Cassia is good against, because she's so vulnerable to ability-based damage. Like, that could have been Gul'dan, it could have been Kael'thas, it could have been Li Ming. Any of those would have been fine. And instead they picked Ariel. I don't get it. I actually am at the point where I believe, unless the enemy team has constructed their draft in such a way, so if you're a first pick, right, this is your 4-5. I don't think Cassie can be picked in the 4-5 unless the enemy team has decided to flex their tank or support. If they've flexed a damage, there's a damage hero in every role that's good against Cassia because of their high ability damage. Right? So they have to have flexed their tank or their support in order to pick Cassia safely in the 4-5. So most of the time, I think Cassie can actually only be drafted as a 5th pick if it's good against the enemy team comp and there's no counters. But Cassia, with even 1 counter, kind of like stops being a hero. The big exception here, to some degree, is Arthas, because Arthas can get on top of Cassia very easily. So if they flex the tank, and you know that team is willing to play tank Arthas as a tank, you can be in a really, really rough position. Honestly, felt like Ballistics was inting the drafts this set. Their drafts were questionable in several cases. I don't exactly know what was going on. Game 3, same set, why Chen? So whenever you ask why Chen, first you ask yourself, is the tank playing it or is the offlaner playing it? If the tank is playing Chen, they're playing Chen because they want to push. Really simple. They're playing Chen because they want to push. This is a 2-lane map, so it's probably not the case. The other reason to play Chen is he wins the lane against whoever the enemy team has drafted as their offlaner. So in this case, Tempest just picked up Mathael as their offlaner. It sort of looks that way, at least. I don't believe Chen's shield is equal to Mathael's damage. Maybe after the nerf it is. Because it wasn't before, but after the nerf it might just be. And also, the fewer interrupts for Chen's drink, the better Chen can kind of become. But they have Uther, and they already had Li Ming, who can go Wave of Force if she wants to. So that's at most 2 interrupts that are currently showing. Of course, then they last pick EDC and add 2 more, plus potentially Mosh Pit. So suddenly, the Chen pick sucks. Is Chen a better push enabler than a noob? Not after the tower buff. A noob is significantly better after the buff to towers, because Chen can't actually... Hello, kitty. Chen can't actually live through towers autoing him anymore, because they do so much more damage since the buff. Is there any way... I like this question. Is there any way Ballistics could have won this? These questions, man. Tassadar's auto is their only real web break. I don't consider Ancestral a good enough save for Hanzo. So if Hanzo gets caught, he just dies. That's assuming that the Rhaegar isn't webbed. They have a winning solo lane with Mathael versus Leoric, but they can just throw Genji against the Mathael and have Leoric in the 4-man. Yeah, I actually don't see how Ballistics could ever possibly win this, assuming both teams were really on their feet and thinking during the game. They don't even necessarily have better shrine control. Like, they didn't draft a win condition that matches the map. It's really weird to see Ballistics not have good drafting. But we also have to remember that Noblesse was the drafter for Ballistics, and arguably the best drafter in the world. And now he's coaching KSV. So, Tash Shield. I'm not sure the Tash Shield's enough into a Jaina, is the thing. Jaina's burst is really high. She has to get nullified by the Tassadar to not kill the Hanzo if the Hanzo gets caught by the Anubarak stun plus Malfurion root chain. I don't know. Hey, Zainide. I watched some of your games in the Open last night. Well played. Well played. We've been live for about an hour, for the record. Team Liquid versus Method Game 2. Can you please explain Kerrigan pick and how could Team Liquid have counted this heavy stun comp? Love the show. Team Liquid versus Method Game 2. Those are European teams. So it's worth noting that Method was second pick here, so you can't really counter a last pick Kerrigan. Doesn't really work that way. Generally speaking, the best way to counter stun compositions is either heroes that get armor when stuns happen, or just having cleanse, right? But a lot of supports don't have cleanse anymore. So if you just draft a heavy stun comp and the enemy team doesn't pick a cleanse support, a lot of times, unless they play very carefully, you just won the game. They just die to CC. CC doesn't necessarily win games, but if you have no answer to the CC and getting caught is instant death, well, you're dead every time you get caught. That's pretty good. They have 3 stuns in base kits, and they potentially have the potential. They have the potential for 2 more from heroics, 3 more from heroics if they really want them. Like, that's an insane CC chain. No one's gonna live through that if they're actually caught. And Method responded with Uther, both as a babysitter for the Hanzo and as a response to the Genji. This is what Korea does very frequently. Korea doesn't ban Genji as much as EU and North America do, because they just draft Uther as a response. You first pick Genji, we'll take Uther. If Genji ever dies in, he's just dead. He just dies every time. That's the Korean response. We're slowly starting to see that response trickle out to other regions. I'm curious to see if we're going to see we're going to get to a point where the Uther response itself starts being punished by like Lunara's or something. Lunara, I think, has been played in 4 games in HGC so far and has a 75% win rate, 3 out of those 4. So I'll be curious to see if that happens more. The problem, of course, is that Lunara tends to die to Genji unless she has greater spell shield and activates it on the Swift Strike, because Swift Strike is balanced. It's not balanced. I thought Team Liquid versus Method would be closer. What happened? Method is a substantially better team than the current roster of Team Liquid. There was no reason to think those games would be close. Dignitas versus Leftovers, Game 1 on Dragonshire. Zilly went for Q on both levels 1 and 4. What was the reasoning here? So we're gonna see the entire draft here. Dignitas versus Leftovers. You gotta remember that Dignitas is just shitting on people. So what they do doesn't necessarily have to make sense. But Q-Build is sort of a happy pet project for some players. June used to play it every so often. And I think basically they were just going all in on resets here. They really wanted to give Poik resets. So if your comp's win condition is kill one person really hard so that Li Ming can then wipe the entire enemy team, if you have a damaging talent, maybe you should consider taking it, even if it's not meta. Also, Zelia was playing Assassin last year. I'm just putting that out there. He's a good support, but you know, maybe he's still a little bit of the Assassin mindset. SSG versus Tempo Storm 3. Why fight over Sappers without Gust or Mosh? I thought pros were supposed to have brain. Not always. Sometimes people... the most likely reason, honestly, without making fun of SSG, is just... the VOD's not up yet. I was going to go watch the VOD. It's just desperation. A lot of times people will feel like they're in a position where they have to make something happen. Particularly with Abathur comps, frequently you're in a position where like, okay, we just need to keep them here. We just need to delay. The Abathur will get us ahead eventually. But if you don't actually go and fight them, that never happens. So... and then a lot of pro players are like, we can get away with this. We can make this work. If we just execute perfectly, it'll be fine. And they don't execute perfectly and they lose. Requiring a level of execution that's perfect is something that's surprisingly common in pros, in pro shot calling, and very rarely realized, which is why sometimes things look really dumb in pro play. Because if they'd been perfect, it would have looked brilliant. But they're not. They're not perfect. They make mistakes. And that just comes with... not making those mistakes comes with either lots and lots of practice in that specific scenario, so you just need lots and lots and lots of games. It comes with really detailed feedback, and you know, constantly being held accountable for the mistakes that you make. SSG versus Tempo Storm Game 4. Solo tank to Haka from SSG or just a tankless comp? This is a tankless comp. And so we talked about the tankless comp earlier, like for the Tempo Storm ran. Tempo Storm had a bunch of heroes that didn't require any peel, so tankless was great. Fine comp. This is a tankless comp with double support. Neither of them have wave clear. And a Hanzo who desperately needs peel. Hanzo is arguably the only hyper carry in the game right now. He can do all the damage for your team as long as you keep him alive. But you need to keep him alive with peel. They have no peel. This comp makes 0 sense. It just literally does not make any sense. It doesn't fill any of those check boxes that we were talking about for the all melee comp earlier that was tankless. Both teams were willing to aggressively trade. Is this a mistake from SSG? Early aggressive trades accelerate the game to 10, which is what the Abathur comp wants, right? Not only the Abathur comp, but the Tracer comp. Tracer scales extremely well. Tracer has the highest single scaling on any ability in Pulse Bomb. The bosses are easier to secure for Tempo Storm once they have Holy Ground. Scaling. Like, you shouldn't want to accelerate the game unless you're the scaling comp. Technically, Space Station Gaming is a team fight comp, so they have to fight, but they don't... Like, why would you want to trade when you miss an Abathur comp? Main tank or solo tank Blaze? I think Blaze can tank as a replacement for Johanna on wave clear-centric maps, and then he's better as an offlaner. Is there a logical explanation to the lack of Master Touch picks on Medivh lately? Yes. People who pick Master Touch... either the way Medivh is played in pro play, he's very conservative. I think there was a pro game where Shrimpy was on. No, it wasn't Shrimpy. Maybe it was Glamour. It was someone on Medivh, and they literally just followed around a Kerrigan for 3 minutes and never landed. Like 3 minutes, no landing. Can you finish a quest when you're not even casting your abilities? Well, no. So if you don't take Master's Touch, then you don't accidentally feed trying to finish it, which is very common, even in pro play, maybe especially in pro play. And it's not like the other talents are useless. Murad just subscribed. Heart. Welcome back to the guest list, Murad, 5 months in a row. It's not like the other talents are useless. The explosive talent on your W is actually really, really reasonable wave clear. Arcane Charge is like 2/3 as good as Master's Touch and doesn't require a quest. So it's not necessarily bad. It's just that if you're not going to finish Master's Touch because you're playing defensively, or you never finish it because you get distracted from it, or when you try and finish it you die, but you really need the Medivh for your composition, just don't take it. Method versus Zealots game 3. Why Method gained so much with the first Web Weavers? 3 forts. So this is actually a really interesting question. So Methods versus Zealots game 3, and the VOD's actually up, thank God. And it's a really basic question in some ways. How come when Method turned in, they got 3 forts, and when Zealots turned in, they only got 1? So first things first, turn-in value. All right, let's look at the lanes here. This is like right after turn-in, the web was just starting to spawn. They're heading down the lanes. This is the first turn-in of the game. The first turn-in of the game tends not to be that great. I think the record is getting all 3 forts with it, but the average is like getting 2 walls. And like that's just not very much. But the big reason, usually the 2 biggest determinations of how much a web weaver is going to get is how far your lanes are pushed out and whether or not it's past 14 minutes. There is a scale, the web weavers scale over time, but there's a hidden scaler in the map that bumps them a lot after 14 minutes because Tomb of the Spider Queen games used to last forever. So Blizzard put that 14-minute scaling in to make the game shorter because later turn-ins were suddenly a lot more valuable and did a lot more damage. But the Tomb Spiders themselves take damage over time from the moment they spawn. If you just left it there, it would slowly die on its own, even if you did no damage to it. Now, the web weavers spawn wherever they run into minions. So they spawn into the core, they do their little whoosh animation. It looks like the intention is they're supposed to be like crawling along the ceiling, and then they drop down when they run into a minion wave on the enemy team. Or a merc, either one. So if your lanes are really pushed out and an enemy team turns in, they can get 0 buildings. Like, even if all your keeps are up, if there's a wave like on your keep and you turn in and the web weavers spawn, they'll die on their own before they get anywhere near your forts. You don't even have to do anything. And it just builds up a nice big wave of experience for you. It's actually really nice. So top wave pushed in all the way to the fort. Mid wave is being contested. Bottom, as you can see, it's extremely, extremely pushed in. And you can see it spawns right there. So bot is going to do absolutely nothing. For the next 30 seconds, Method can just ignore bot. Gul'dan is free clearing top because of the focus on mid by Zealots. And everyone else on Method who's not clearing top is pretty much going mid to start the clear. I actually think Leoric could have come here even as well, and it would not have been remiss. Bear in mind, if this wall was here, it would have gotten the wall and then pretty much died. But because the wall was already gone, they're able to push in very aggressively and get the fort. But top is dead. Bottom is getting very minimal value. And this is all because of the lanes. All because of how far the lanes are pushed in and the way Methods split their wave clear. Now, several seconds later, Method gets their first turn in. So, things to note here. 1. Method got the Siege Giants bottom. This doubles the pushing power of that web weaver. Right? 2. Their lanes were all very, very pushed in. The web weavers are basically spawning next to the fort wall. Next to the fort wall. The fort wall down here is already dead. And the only one that's taken it, like, Zealots rotates 5 mid to threaten this web weaver. And it takes a substantial amount of damage very, very quickly. Now, because the top and bottom web weavers are going straight onto the forts, bear in mind those walls are already dead because Method has been out clearing in the early game. Method decides to just stay here. They have a wave coming. They're waiting for the wave. The web weavers themselves will already get the forts. Top is pretty much guaranteed to die at this point. It's either going to be dead or on so little health that Tracer can literally QQ, 3 Qs in, kill it, and leave with E and be totally, totally safe. And Method just stays mid. Clears that fort. Bottom and top are already gone. There was a game, I think last week in EU, that exemplifies how important wave clear is better than any game I think I've seen in pro play in recent memory on the map. There it is. Zool. And Johanna. If you have enough wave clear, you can actually let your opponent turn in on Tomb the Spider Queen, and the turn in itself does nothing because you just clear the web weavers so fast. Zool is kind of in that category because your waves are so pushed up, they spawn so far back, and then you just clear them very, very quickly. And then you just hold your gems. Hold your gems and hold your gems and hold your gems and hold your gems until that 14-minute spike, and suddenly you just win the game off of a single turn in. It's kind of ridiculous. So you can see they don't really fight over it. Method actually ends up getting an early turn in here because their waves are so pushed in. Maybe it's a different game. Might have even been a different game. There might have been 2 Zool games. I might just be going crazy. But Tomb of the Spider Queen is just a strange map where enough wave clear becomes a win condition in and of itself. And all you need to do is clear waves. You never have to fight. You just have to clear waves, and eventually you'll just win the game by attrition. It's actually so annoying to play against. Why is Tempest so strong right now? Tempest has always been the best team fighting team in the world, and I believe we're in a kind of a team fight meta to a large degree. So that makes sense. But Tempest is also just shitting on people with their drafts. Their drafts are substantially better than other KSVs or Ballistics', and like they're easily top 3 anyway. So beating their sister teams, like playing KSV week 1 and being able to have a hard counter to Lucio, who is considered so strong, is so good. But I imagine KSV will come back with a different style of drafting. It'll be stronger against Tempest was doing, but we won't see that until Clash. So Tempest, for the meantime, is the undisputed champion of Korea after this week. Method versus Zealots, game 3, 16 minutes in. Zealot siege and keep and took him, but lost Hanzo and Rhaegar. What could they do better there? That's a really specific question. Method versus Zealots, game 3. So this is Siege. Zealous has an 18 to 16 advantage. They have the Webweaver turn in. Superior drafting and superior buttoning. Yes, Fasamasti, thank you. And at this point, they're just poking. The safe call here is as soon as the top Webweaver dies, back off. It's not going to get any further value, and just play for 20. That's like the safe call, right? But Zealots has Tassadar, which gives them reasonable heal. Arthas has self-heal. They have the shields from Tyrael every 10 seconds. So if they play around those cooldowns and poke up whenever they have a minion wave and just keep poking the keep, eventually they should be in relatively good shape to just take the keep, because they're up against a soul support Malfurion, and Malfurion does arguably have a lot of support, but they can just poke. They can just poke with Task Storm. Their minion wave will be here momentarily. Like, they can just keep poking. But they overextend a little bit. They take some fort damage, which they should never do. You should just step up enough to let the task chain cast on the fort. They get clumped a little bit. This ends up being a really nice Horrify. And Zarmany gets checked into the wall, but despite all the silences, he gets the Ancestral. He gets everything off. They also could have just popped Army, and the Army would have tanked the keep shots, and then as soon as keep dies, they could have just left with Tyrael speed. That was another option that they had. They also had Sank, and now they should just leave. They've gotten everything they could possibly want, and they should just leave, right? They're a keep up, and they're going to be the first to 20. There's no reason to stay here, even if one person dies. So Chris goes back in, even though Tyrael... Notice the way they backed up, right? Notice the way they backed up. Chris should just be leaving. Chris should just be leaving. Instead, he's poking, he's poking, he's poking. And he ends up overextended because everyone else backed up. If you're at range damage, with exceptions like Genji and Tracer because their mobility is so insane, there's a first in, last out policy. If your tank starts backing up, you want to try to stay behind your tank. Fundamental rule in HOTS. Respect the tank line. There's a vertical line that goes up and down. Wherever your tank is, if you're at range, you should be behind it. Genji and Tracer are exceptions. Maybe Greymane's exceptions under some circumstances just because of their sheer mobility. But Hanzo, not an exception. He should be behind his tanks. He was in front of his tanks, and he died. Everyone tried to save him and fed more. If no one had tried to save the Hanzo, just the Hanzo would have died. This was just bad play from Zealots. They should have gotten the keep and left, because it's the safest play. They will have to guard turn-ins for the next level, but they have vision from Task, they have the bounces from Hanzo's W's. They can guard turn-ins pretty effectively and play for 20, and then once they hit 20, Method's going to back off. Method's not going to take an 18 to 20 fight. It's just not going to happen. Methods versus Zealots, game 3. Same game. 17 minutes in game time. Do I agree with the decision to not siege top keep with boss and web weavers before 20 hits? So they get boss and turn in off of that misplay by Zealots. Look at how close Zealots are to 20. Imagine if they just backed off. And so Leoric, they do actually end up sieging top with 4. Leoric goes to clear. And I guess the question here is, do I agree with not sieging with all 4? And I think the answer... So there's two alternatives. There's two plays here. You send the Leoric to double soak. This pushes out your lanes more, which is not necessarily an advantage for you because it gives Zealots easier access to soak experience after the fact because the lanes get pushed up. And they can get 20 more easily, but they're going to hit 20 no matter what. I think in this scenario, you actually force the 18 and 19 fight before they're 20. I don't think you back off. I think this is entirely too conservative by Method. But you also have to remember that Method is a very confident team that is probably better than Zealots. So the conservative call, when Zealots has shown a tendency to overextend when allowed to, may actually be safer in many ways because you're playing around enemy team. This does guarantee that they get the top keep wall regardless, and they're also likely to get mid keep wall here, which is a significant chunk of experience. It also pushes out all their lanes, which does push a lot of experience towards Zealots, but it also means, and makes it harder for Method to soak, but it also means that if Zealots does do something, because they're not going to get turned in first, Method will get turned in first, they can guarantee 20 and then have a 20 to 20 fight pretty easily. So I think Method here was just playing the long game. I'm not sure who has bigger spikes at 20. Gul'dan's spike at 20 is really reasonable. Rhaegar's is just okay. Holy Arena is quite strong. Infinite Force Wall can be very strong. Tracer keeps scaling. Silence and Tomb is really good. It's possible Method just felt they had a better level 20. If you feel you have a better level 20 and you know you're going to get it, then that's like a really good call to make. If you feel you have a worse level 20, that would be a bad call. But with the Tracer and the Leoric, they probably just genuinely felt like they had a better level 20. And so they played conservatively, hoping for the 20 versus 20 fight. Yeah, I'm happy with that answer. Methods versus Zealots, game 3. Or maybe you can review the entire game from this point to the end of the game. I mean, this game is, I think, at this point in the game, both of these are kind of team fight-oriented comps with just enough wave clear to make them not insanely bad on Tomb. Right? So it's a question of who gets the turn in, who gets picked off. As long as they keep trading Leoric comes back faster, they can tempo wins. Zealot sees them going for boss. Method immediately backs to prevent the backdoor. Zealots made a dumb decision here. They can't backdoor core. They can't. They don't have the character comp for it. Do you see a Greymane? Do you see an Illidan? Do you see any of the high core damage heroes? Not really. But it did get them off of boss, so that was kind of a win. I think Method didn't have any keeps down, but they could, get boss and then push in for the win. But then they wipe a core, and it goes back and forth. Yeah, and you don't draft core damage heroes. Arguably, Gul'dan is the best core damage hero on either side in this comp. So neither team should be just trying to go core unless you're just... Because any team can go core if they don't respond, right? So they see them going boss, like, okay, we don't do boss, we can't fight them. Let's backdoor core. But as soon as they back, they should have just run. And Zealots is just not good at running. They don't understand when they should run away and disengage. That would have bought them enough time, I think, to get turn in and have their reses come back up. And then Method makes the same mistake of trying to go core. They can't really do it. And they wipe. But eventually both teams make enough bad decisions back and forth that Method ends up winning because they had essentially because they had Leoric, to be honest. Like, Leoric was the first person to die in every fight, but he came back sooner. Ended up being kind of a silly game in the very, very late stages. First time an HGC Blaze main tank? Oh, that is the first time an HGC Blaze was a main tank in Game 2. Yes. I would not count this as a tankless comp. Blaze is absolutely tankier. But it's not the last. Dragonshire, Tomb, and Infernal Shrine seems to be the maps where we're going to occasionally see Blaze tanks. And not coincidentally, those are the maps where we occasionally saw Johanna tanks. Game 2, 15 minutes. What was the best way to use Dragon Knight by Zealots? Man, so many questions about this specific series from eNinja. I'm not sure if he's a fan or just found these games particularly fascinating. So at this point in the game, your number one thing is you want to open up bottom keep if you can. The thing about the Dragon Knight into a Mathael is Mathael can shit on the Dragon Knight so fast. He just melts it. So you want to keep him away as best you can. Generally speaking, you want to, in a situation where a team has a significant percentage-based damage dealer, you want to punt them from range so that they can't like do anything to you, and then back up. So trying to go for the bottom keep with the talent advantage here is correct, but they don't correctly play around the Mathael, and the Tracer overextends and dies. And once they're in essentially a 4v5, and they give the experience over from the comeback mechanics, there's really nothing they can do with the Dragon Knight. But oh, I see. No, it's the 15-minute one. It's this one, the one where Zealots gets it. Okay, so Zealots now has a Dragon Knight. Bottom fort is nearly dead. Opening up the map is always a advantage. So and you want to pay attention to where your minions are. Minions do a lot of damage to buildings. Generally speaking, you don't want to split with the Dragon Knight in the late game. In the early game, it's fine, but in the late game, you want to push with it with your team. Which they are not doing. And it comes here eventually, but it's already taken a ton of free damage. Getting the keep here, or getting the fort here is fine. It gives them a significant chunk of experience. If they could get this fort and bottom fort, they would actually be in a really good position in terms of the race to 20. But be patient. Like, it has 53 seconds left. Generally speaking, you want the time and the health to run down at the exact same time. Like, that's ideal. So if your team's 4 top and you have the Dragon Knight, just fucking hang out. Clear the wave. Maybe go bottom and clear that wave, and then come back mid when your team's actually there and push with your team so that there's actually a threat. Method here can just poke the Dragon Knight for free. If they'd been more conservative with it, that extra 40 seconds of time on the Dragon Knight could have resulted in both forts. Probably not 20, but easily both forts. And now they have to play for a full level. They're just going to have to just try and soak 20 without getting engaged on. It's really not ideal. Really not ideal. "25 minutes. After the teamfight method, just siege, keep, and core is 5v4. How is this even possible after an equal game?" So 25 minutes in. I assume he means by game time. So, A, scaling. Infinite Archon, Chromie's quest is finished. Tracer can instantly one-shot anyone with Get Stuffed at 20. Instantly one-shotting people is something Tracers are actually really good at 20. And they can't really get engaged on because they have a Medivh, right? They have portals to just leave if they ever really want to. Chromie's poke onto structures actually isn't bad over a long period of time. Actually lied. Enemy team has Medivh. I'm insane. This is actually somewhat risky because of the Medivh. They can root the portals as they happen. But relatively in game, but 20 spikes. Like, there's significant 20 spikes on Method's end. The biggest 20 spike on Zealot's end is Holy Arena? It's not that good. Not a lot of scaling. Look at that. Look at that. Someone's low, and Schwimby just goes in and kills them with no possible counterplay. There's no reaction time that's going to save you from that. You have to force of will as the Tracer is blinking in to have any chance of saving the target. Because it's just bomb W and they're dead. It's also worth noting that the core stops scaling at 20 minutes. Core actually does scale over time, but it stops at 20 minutes exactly. So this is 6 additional minutes of leveling and hero scaling from levels. So the core, relatively speaking, is about as weak as it's ever going to get in a pro game relative to the team attacking it. Surprised we see so little Defense of the Angels. In my opinion, it's a very good talent. I actually like Defense of the Angels quite a bit, especially with Herodic Reforging. It gives you 100%, nearly with the level 7 and Herodic Reforging at 16. It gives you basically 100% uptime on Holy Ground, which is quite good. But yeah, don't underestimate level 20 talents. The biggest example of this is every game on Volskaya. Really good drafts on Volskaya all involve compositions that win because their comp makes sense in the late game in terms of scaling. Tassadar, Ariel, Hanzo is an example from Tempo Storm that they ran on Volskaya. And the Ariel had lots of stacks from her level 16 talent. She took the level 7 Globe talent, which means that her W only uses 25% of its bar. And then every time she picked up a Globe, she would get a full W op, but it would only take 25%. And she would get a free stack. She did that for like 6 levels. Every 4 seconds, she was healing in an area for more than an Ancestral heals for. Pretty balanced, right? Her stacks were so high that she actually didn't... I don't think June got a full bar at the end of the game. Defense is the hardened shield. Oh! I thought you were talking about the attack speed. What's the attack speed called? Too many new talents. Too many reworks. Am I streaming on a... I actually don't think the Hardened Shield is that good, to be honest. It has basically no CDR if you have minions, but I don't know how good it is compared to the other talents. Anyway, level 20 can matter. Scaling can matter. It's really the long and short of it. Why is Varian seen basically no play? Is it because of the increased focus on the early game? Yeah. If you lose the early game, you can just lose the game on quite a few maps after the changes. The minion buff changes in particular. If Varian wanted to be viable pre-10, all he really needs is wave clear, to be honest. If Varian had like acceptable wave clear, it'd be fine. But also, Varian, like, what does he counter, really? Hypermobility? Kind of. Not really without the stun. If he had stun on charge, he would counter mobility heroes, but he doesn't. He just has taunt. So Varian's just okay. You can make an argument that he's still good into Tracer, but EU's playing a lot of Tracer, and EU doesn't seem interested in playing Varian to counter her, so I imagine they kind of know what they're talking about. Why is Braxis such a high priority map ban? Because you lose in the draft. Braxis is the #1 map for just straight up losing in the draft. And drafting is already hard enough and stressful enough for most pro drafters without throwing Braxis into the mix. It also requires a very different playstyle from almost every other map. So when you're practicing Braxis, you're practicing only Braxis. Whereas if you're practicing Dragonshire, you're kind of practicing Tomb. And if you're practicing Infernal Shrines, you're kind of practicing Battlefield of Eternity. Varian is great at going face, no? Post 10, like... Arguably post 4, he's like okay at going face, and then post 10, he's really good at it, but... Ballistic Tempest Game 3, 2 minutes. Why do both teams play such high priority on bot camp? That's a really specific question. The VODs aren't up yet. Damn it! Why are the VODs not up? I think the answer here is not necessarily that they're placing a high priority on bot camp. I remember the thing. I just wanted to watch it for you guys. It's not so much they're playing a high priority on bot camp, per se. It's that there's nothing else to fight over. And Tempest really is a team fight-oriented team. So if they have a chance to fight, they're going to take it. Right? Also, if you don't take it, you have to clear it. The imaging digs, you have to deal with it. And Tempest has a really strong early game comp in terms of pick potential with the slide into Uther Stun into Li Ming combo. Like that's a lot of damage, and they have a lot of chase potential with the speed from Tyrael, whose name I forgot there for a second. Whereas Ballistics, their early game arguably isn't that good. So Tempest is a superior team fight team, something to fight over. Great, let's fight over it. I don't know why Ballistics prioritize the camp so much. To me, that's a little bit more confusing because Tempest has a good team fight composition and they're a good team fighting team, so they want to fight over things. Ballistics was a macro team. They seem to have lost a little bit of their identity in a lot of cases without SCS or without Noblesse on the team. Refresh. Nah, it's still not there. It's fine. It's not like I depend on Master League for everything. I do depend on Master League for a lot. Shout out to, by the way, to Master League. For those of you who are not aware, it is for sale. The developer currently cannot put any more time into it, so he's willing to sell it, but in order to buy it, you also have to remember that you're going to be developing, providing your own development staff. So if anyone really wants to keep this invaluable, probably quite profitable, I imagine, with some changes, for instance, ads going, something to think about. I know I have a lot of developers who actually watch my channel. Have I considered talking to GFE about getting it? I had not considered that. Now that I am considering it, I'm not sure GFE would be interested. But, okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing, guys. This has nothing to do with HGC. This is just an esports thing. In order to be a successful esports organization, successful for the organization, not the players, the most important thing isn't actually victories. It's not winning games. It's having some sort of model that brings in money. And the number one way to do that is content. So when Reynad started Tempo Storm, he understood this. He spent a ton of money on building a really versatile, functional website that had a ton of cool features. You could build decks. You could, talk about the decks in a really specific way for Hearthstone. And people made content for the site for free. And he also brought in pro players or streamers under his banner and paid them to make content for the site. And the site was content. And it became a community portal for this game that everyone was like really, really excited about. It was a big deal. That's really easy for Hearthstone because Hearthstone has a lot of people playing it, so there's a lot more money to be made. Heroes of the Storm doesn't have that many people playing it. And of the people that play it, only a tiny, tiny fraction actually watch HGC. Our average is like 10 to 15,000 viewers. There's maybe 250 to 1,000 to 1 million people playing the game, depending on what estimate system you're using. So not a lot of people who would care. But if GFE were making content for like a good variety of play levels and then also had something like Master League to bolster them, I'm actually a little bit surprised that Heroes Hearth hasn't put in an offer for it yet, although they might have. I haven't heard that they have, and I do write for Heroes Hearth as well. I have a relationship with their developers. But basically the way to make money in esports is treat the esports part as advertising and make content that people want to read or watch and care about. I think GFE kind of tried to do that, but they weren't willing to put the money into the site. and as a result, didn't really go the way they wanted it to. There is money to be made in esports, though. But it involves creating content and not sponsoring teams or even having teams. Tempo Storm, if they had not one player who ever went to a tournament but was full of just popular streamers who made a lot of content for the site, I think they would probably have done just as well as if they've never had a Hearthstone pro, quote unquote. So, yeah, Master League's for sale. I don't know if GFE would be interested because I feel like GFE hasn't adopted that philosophy of, oh yeah, we create content and tools for the community and that's how we bring people in. It doesn't seem like that's where they are at, but based on the fact that they even didn't have a website for a while and they had a website and it was bad and they remade the website and it's still like underutilized and not updated frequently. So I don't know. Bear in mind that GFE is a solo endeavor in terms of financing. It's just one guy. Can't confirm there are a lot of software engineering. Yeah, I know. I seem to attract a certain type of person in terms of the way I do my analysis of games, which is okay. I'm happy with my niche. GFE is a sole supported by one guy who happens to have a lot of money and just kind of wanted to have an esports org. I don't know if he ever wanted to make money off of it or not, but you know, he had a World Championship Rocket League team for a little bit. I guess that's now sold off. But interesting things about esports. Complete digression from HGC. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. This was the HGC post show number 3 for 2018 season of HGC. Thank you for all the post show questions. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you for all the interaction in chat. And I will see you guys next week, hopefully with good news of Gale Force Esports beating Heroes Hearth Esports. But regardless, I will see you next week with more updates on every region of HGC and a better idea of exactly who will be going to the first Western Clash of 2018. Remember, this is a stream where we never lose, we always win, we learn something. Learning is always a win. Have a good day, everyone.